Right, the final panel. I would like to call on stage Mirko, who will chair and facilitate this panel. He's got a very entertaining and interesting and compelling 15-minute presentation, and then there'll be the panel discussion. And the subject is the future of retail. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Stay here. The show just is starting, otherwise you will miss it for sure. So thanks for the invitation, first of all, and it's a pleasure to be with you. Topic is now less around tech. It's more around what does the consumer, what does the retail look like in the future. It's less around robotics and automation like this morning. So it's about forward-looking, and it's about how to adapt and how to adjust to these key challenges. So just as a kind of keynote up front, as it was introduced for 50 minutes or so, I would share with you our latest study we just conducted shortly around the globe, and it's around the new reality. So the new reality for retailers and CPGs, and it's primarily around influence versus affluence. And why influence versus affluence? It's primarily due to various reasons I will cover quite soon. Myself, I'm a partner, shareholder, managing director with A.T. Kearney, leading our European consumer retail sector, and for sure it's a pleasure to be with you here today. Looking backwards and saying, okay, what was the mass market? Where was it based on in the last century almost? It was primarily based on three pillars. One pillar was clearly a focus on the affluence and where the affluence is. A second one was clearly invest the advertising where to seduce consumers. And the third one was clearly about building scale around the entire supply chain, in your store network, and so on. Nevertheless, looking forward, the mass market of the future will definitely thrive for three fundamentally different drivers and pillars. It's around the trust one, and in the age of information and transparency, trust is everything. How to connect to the consumer, how to influence the consumer. Then it's around the influence. So it's about not anymore on just who has the money, it's about who has the influence. And then for sure the third one is around personalization. So as you could imagine, it's about treating consumers as individuals. Data is the new currency, and customer engagement and experiences are key going forward. And a result of this is definitely a massive change. And it's a massive change from an affluence model to an influence model along various dimensions. So it's about not anymore about choose to own, it's also choose to do. So it's around the experience aspect. It's about consumption drivers, which is not about just value, it's about values and what drives values. And it's for sure about business models, which are much more dynamic, and we will tackle this in a conversation later on, and multifaceted. And it's about not just about spotting the big trends, it's about really spotting and seeing these so-called pockets of scale. So what are the consumers and what are the consumer drives groups to tackle? And looking into this and understanding the three pressure points behind it, it's almost a perfect storm. There is a clear drive around and clear pressure point around the demographic shifts globally. There are clear changing values, and then for sure there is the hyperconnectivity. And for this we initiated a global study recently around 7,000 consumers in 7 countries to really better understand what is the consumers and the consumption behavior, how does it evolve. And when you are looking into this, there is a clear, across all countries, there is a clear focus on the primary generations. Looking 10 years ahead, it's primarily the Gen Z. So everyone who was born between 1998 and 2016, this group of Generation Z will be more than 30% of our entire population globally in 10 years from now. And this will add to around 1.5 billion adults, which we have there. So that was the intention of the study, better understanding what drives this Generation Z and what are their behaviors. And with each and every of these generations, they are shaped primarily by fundamental demographic and economic trends. These are around getting bigger. 5 out of these 7 countries are growing in scale. There are only primarily 2 countries, Germany and Japan, which probably stay stable if it comes to number of inhabitants. They will get older. They will get more diverse. So you have even these majority minorities, as you call them in the US. They will get less traditional if it comes to family patterns, for example. They will get more unequal, and they will follow the clear city trends, so getting more urban. these are basic trends you see across all generations, and these are the key economic drivers behind it. And if we are tackling these different aspects and just starting about trust, and a brand at the end of the day simple is around trust, it's about understanding what drives this. And there is a key concern with Western economies in most of the countries. We looked and said, okay, how much do you really trust into the big brands and into the big corporations? And just over the last 10 years, you saw, or 5 years, you saw more and more consumers being less and less confident into these big brands and big corporations. And in almost all countries, so every country from UK to Germany, you see that there is a confidence which is already significantly below 50%. And if you are just looking into emerging markets, India, China, there is still a bigger confidence in the big brands. Nevertheless, also there you see that confidence is somehow shrinking. And if you're imagining what the transparency, the hyperconnectivity of our today's world can impact, there is this example from last year. As you could imagine, or as you are imagining, United Airlines mistreatment of one of their passengers was viral within hours. And there was another passenger who filmed that behavior, that situation, and it was already treated before the plane took off. And it was retweeted almost 170,000 times. And it was seen almost 500 million times. So, and that is something about influence, how a single passenger, not a big celebrity, can influence globally, not just about the share price, but also significantly negatively can influence the brand. And if you're looking into it and say, okay, what are the key drivers and characteristics of the Generation Z, so the generation which will be the key generation over the next decades, it's about different characteristics. It's around digital natives, for sure. It's about being more tolerant, being more inclusive. It's about being more responsible, more educated or even self-educated, entrepreneurial, and community-minded in different aspects. For sure, this is not all fits the same, but this is something which drives the consumers. And the younger generations, they are more and more actively looking for brands that do good. And if you're asking them, you see that especially the younger generations significantly are looking more for brands or for retailers or for CPGs, which are really doing good. And you see that this is for sure differentiating across countries, but it's especially differentiating across generations. And there is a higher willingness to pay, for sure. There's also a higher willingness to focus on either environmentally friendly or socially friendly brands, and companies are for sure monetizing on this. And I will not go into each and every discussion. We can cover this later in our conversation, but this is just a phenomena you are seeing across categories, and you are seeing more and more often. As a second trend after trust, it's the influence trend. There is this quote from Jeff Bezos: if you can make customers unhappy on the internet, they can each tell 6,000 people or even more, as we saw with the United Airlines example. So influence is, at the end, influence is about the capacity of people to produce effects with others in that way or another. And the internet, and especially social media, is for sure a true catalyst for that one. So better understanding this one, and if it comes to social media, you see that there are more and more consumers which are completely or entirely connected, continuously connected with social media, and we counted it about, I think we said 20 or 30 times per day. That's somehow almost continually connected, and they are really looking into, okay, what is going on, and what can I share with the community? And social media platforms currently already connect 3.5 billion inhabitants on our planet, so almost 50% or half of the population is permanently connected through their smartphones. If you're seeing this hyperconnectivity, and we tackle this later also in our conversation, and you said already what does it mean, internet, social networks, connectivity for the entire supply chain, there is a huge impact behind it. And we also asked ourselves and said, okay, influencers, what does it mean? Is there something like a think of being too popular? Are micro-influencers the key drivers, or is it more the macro-influencers? And we tried to measure this and said, okay, what is the respondent? What is the engagement of the audience, of the so-called macro influencers, which have 10 million or 1 million plus followers, and the micro influencers, which have up to 100,000 followers. And clearly you see in trend that it's not just about being as important as possible, it's also that there is a clear group of influencers emerging around the globe, which is tackling or collaborating with certain brands, with certain categories, in certain environments. So there is a certain decreasing productivity if it comes to audience engagement, if the group is getting too big, and companies are building on it. And that's the reason also why when you're looking into leading CPGs, like for example Adidas, I assume we had also some Adidas folks around here during the conference, they are also collaborating extensively with their marketing investments, which are putting more and more digital, and where they have really a whole range of micro-influencers rather than just a big gun celebrity. So that's a clear phenomena around the globe. And if it comes to the third trend after trust, influence, it's around personalization. If it comes to personalization, clearly it comes to data. And the future is clearly around personalization. And if you are looking into this and just looking which computer power is around, you see that currently, for example, on each and everyone's individual iPhone, there is more computer power than the NASA used for all the Apollo missions together. So just imagine that one. And just imagine what is possible with this data and what you can do with the data. And there are some activities listed. And consumers are, for sure, they are willing to provide data for a kind of value-add personalization. Nevertheless, for sure, there's also an increasing cautiousness about what to share and how to share and what to get out of this. And that is clearly the situation where you see that data is the future. It's a new currency. And how to use this data to better attract and convert and connect with the consumer, that's a clear phenomena across various topics. Big CPGs, Adidas I mentioned, but there are also others, like for example L'Oreal, are building on this extensively to really personalize and show the consumers how to connect and how to demonstrate that each and every individual brand knows them and targets them individually. So that was a quick overview about the demographic shifts, changing consumer values, and the hyperconnectivity, which will define the future if it comes to retail, if it comes to consumption, and if it comes to which channels may emerge. So when we are asked and say, okay, what will it matter in the future of the consumer brands, there are primarily around 6 actions which we have defined and said, okay, that is something to be aware of if you're a player in that industry, if you're serving the consumer. So number 1 is about invest in customer intimacy. We will see some examples later on. So it's clearly about how can I really use the data as a priced asset, and how can I relentlessly tailor my offering, my services, my products to the needs of the consumers. Second one is about adapt the consumer segmentation model as complex cohorts emerge. So it's move really down to the individual. It's really about using advanced technologies like AI to better understand the consumer and really refine the consumer cohorts you're really tackling out there. Then it's about delivering customized solutions in the so-called pockets of scale. It's about targeting individualized experiences, but please at scale, because you need to make this economically acceptable. Embed personalization for efficient customization and build communities around it. Fourth one is around adjust your marketing budget, for sure, to reflect future generations, young generations, to clearly address them. Optimize the mix of the cohort level, go more digital, and learn to sprint. So when you are seeing, for example, Adidas, which clearly said we want only spend 90% plus of our media spending in the future or in the 1-2 years ahead already in digital channels and in social media. Then it's about engage micro-influencers to build authentic communities. It's about how can I really systemize influencer usage? How can I really track the success of these influencers? How can I really seek quality instead of just quantity? And how can I really build long-term ambassadorships among these players, among these folks out there, which are trying to connect with my future consumers? And last but not least, it's about build trust with sharper value propositions. So be aware, take these pricing opportunities, but be aware about the trends and be aware what the consumer is willing to pay for. So That was a quick roundup, 14 minutes, 30 seconds. So thanks for your attention. And I will welcome on stage now two of my guests, or of our guests, for the upcoming discussion. So, preceding, quick introduction. So, I think it's a great honor for all of us to have both with us, Susan and Shrenik. Susan, I don't know who is aware of Susan. Susan works with and supports startups and early-stage digital businesses in the consumer and tech segments, and holds various board and advisory posts. So, Susan is a chairman of, or chairwoman, of Mate.com, Outfittery, Push Doctor, and holds non-executive positions with, for example, Eurostar, or also with a Middle Eastern luxury group called Altaya. Before playing or focusing primarily on this startup support and digital business roles, her executive career, Suzanne worked across the consumer spectrum from big retail groups like Harrods or John Lewis to House of Fraser, and recently was a managing director with TK Maxx. In the most recent role, she was a COO for Superdry, where she significantly supported the turnaround of the Superdry contemporary fashion brand, and also ensured that this was adequately reflected in the overall share price. So Suzanne, welcome on stage, and thanks to have you with us. Our further guest is Shrenik Sardalji, Head of Next Generation Experiences at Wayfair. So Shrenik is a polyglot developer and technology plumber. He drives engineering and software development in Wayfair Next to help create next generation experiences in AR and VR. And so welcome, Shrenik, to have you on stage. And I think it's great to use the next 40 minutes for our joint discussion. And we will start a conversation now. And for sure, you are more and more or very much motivated to jump in. We will do a kind of Q&A also to the later part of the session. So perhaps before starting, would you both just like to introduce yourself very quickly?
Yeah, I think you've probably done a good job of that.
I think I'm now asked to sit.
So I'm not sure there's a lot else to add. Obviously, I've been in retail for quite a number of years, more than I care to admit, I guess, and have gone through the conventional retail era into the omnichannel era, and I've latterly focused on the digital and tech era of consumer, and focusing very much now on what I call the post-channel era, which is very exciting, and I'm very pleased to be here today.
Yeah, super. Thank you.
On this stage, I'm still a child, I think, when I compare myself to you both. I lead a small team at Wayfair. We're trying to figure out how to use emerging technologies to create the next generation customer experience. So that means augmented reality, virtual reality, 3D, AI, voice. So I started off as a software developer, and now I'm kind of trying to figure out what the future of retail is for Wayfair.
Welcome also. So Shrenik, you mentioned AR and VR as new technologies. How are they really influencing the customer experience?
Yeah, so for Wayfair at least, right, we're furniture shopping, right? It's a heavily visual experience. So the better you can merchandise a product, the better it is, right? So we started exploring how to use 3D as a new medium. So what we figured was traditionally, like, if you're going to buy a couch, right, you would kind of probably visit your local neighborhood store. You would see something that you like, go back home, take measurements, see if it fits or not. So we're trying to remove all that friction with what we're trying to do. So we're trying to take the store to the customer, right? So one way to do that is through technologies like augmented reality, where you can actually place furniture in the context of your space at true scale, right? So it's very easy. We completely remove the friction of shopping for furniture online. Like, what's the better way to shop for home than from home, right? So I think we're trying to figure out how to use AR, VR, and it's worked out pretty well for us. So I think we don't have any brick and mortar stores, so it's even more important for us to figure out how the customer can visualize something in their space.
You brought a video with you, right?
Oh yes, that's true.
Should we show it if there is a chance?
Yes, let's do that. that was a video of our AR feature. It's called View in Room. It's available on most phones today. So for me, like AR is, I think of it as a practical, like end of the funnel kind of use case, right? There's this other thing called virtual reality, right? So virtual reality, I think, is very useful for providing inspiration. So what we can do is we can drop customers into these magical spaces that are completely furnished, and they have like almost like an in-store experience but at home. So that's how we're trying to use these new visualization technologies.
So these are also great examples if it comes to building trust into your brand, into your products, into your services.
Yeah, I think so. And it's funny, like, so we, that is one of the biggest friction points we've seen so far, right? We don't want people to get out their measuring tape and actually like measure the space that they want to put their product in. So I think that as time flies, I think we will kind of build more trust with the consumer, saying that, hey, this is actually how this thing's going to look like, and we will kind of deliver. We will follow that up with an amazing delivery experience as well.
Is it, when you're saying, okay, it's already implemented, how important is it currently for your business? For, let's say, acquire or attracting new consumers, converting these consumers to real shoppers? I don't know, getting more cross and upsell?
Yeah, it's worked out well so far. So I think, like I said, if we don't have any brick and mortar stores, right? So it's even more important for us because it's online only. It's interesting because I think that today, like I feel like millennials and the Gen Zs, that they're more keen to shop online. They would love to use technologies like this, right? So I think that we're kind of seeing a phase where, as time goes by, I think the adoption of this technology and the use of this technology is going to be more widespread. We're not there today yet. Like, so I think the technology still is more like a marketing. A lot of people use it as a marketing gimmick of sorts. For us, it's more, I guess, real because the problem it's a true customer problem that we're trying to solve. But I think over time, what will happen is people will learn how to use it. They're not used to the technology today. They're not used to interacting with the phone and trying to place a virtual product on the phone in their space. Right? It's kind of weird. So I think once we get over that hump, we'll start seeing a lot more results.
That's great. Suzanne, you are exposed to a lot of companies in your board routes. Are you also aware, or are a lot of these technologies are already common?
I wouldn't say they're common. I think they are, because of the great work that's just been described that's being done through these innovative teams, they are becoming more understood. I think the true value of them, to the point just made, will come over time. And as you've just put in your presentation, within a very short period of time, more than 50% of our consumers will be millennials or younger. And to them, these technologies will be a hygiene factor. And so if you're not considering them, if you're not implementing them, if you're not working on them, if you're not having your trial and testing now, you're going to progressively fall behind. And so investing in these things and being part of the early phase and stage of that investment and learning the lessons that need to be learned and finessing how you implement these technologies, you will drop behind.
Are there certain challenges around it? It all sounds so straightforward and clear.
I don't think it's straightforward and clear. I'm sure that there have been many sleepless nights.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it looks so nice.
And I think one of the big challenges we all have in the digital and tech space is resource and talented resource. It's a global challenge. Getting the right teams together is extremely hard, and securing them and keeping them with you for the time that you need them to stay with you, because these are long processes, not just to deliver, but to test and trial and evolve over time. And the resource challenge is very real for all of us. So we are all trying to deliver fantastic tools. It takes time, it takes resource. Without that really scarce global talent, it's very hard.
Yeah, I want to add to that. Like, I think that apart from the talent itself, right? I think at least for these kind of experiences, so I think today, right, you need an image to kind of to merchandise a product and sell a product, right? In the next 2 years, you have to have a 3D model of that product in order to sell it. Like, the images are not going to be enough, right? So I think we'll get to that stage where 3D will be a requirement for merchandising. So I think, so we're going to prepare for that. And I think the bottleneck is actually creating the 3D content itself. It's not a simple problem to kind of, let's say I want to sell this kind of table, right? So making a 3D, a digitized version of this product is not straightforward. So I think we're going to figure out how to do that, and that's the bottleneck. The content itself.
Mm-hmm. Is there, when you're looking ahead and say, look, 5 to 10 years ahead, are there any, I heard a lot of AI, I heard a lot of AR, VR, 3D. What are the technologies you are seeing in the midterm future really being disruptive for the retail industry primarily?
I think I can take that, I guess. One thing that I've stopped referring to, I guess, AR and VR as AR and VR. I think that we'll get to a point where we want to. I refer to as spatial computing, right? So you're kind of computing in your space. So I think we're going to move from the desktop or your laptop or your screen to your space. Okay. So as that happens, I think that at least for our industry, right? So it makes it. We can come up with a lot more use cases for using since. You can have, so imagine a day where you'll have your calendar in one space, right? You'll have a browser on a wall. You'll have a little game that you're probably playing like somewhere on the floor or something like that, right? So you're kind of computing spatially, and your mind is mapped to your space, right? So then you can imagine a scenario where you're browsing on the wall, and you're like looking at products or something, and then you kind of just pull that out and put it in your space, right? So that kind of that's what I mean by spatial computing. I think that that's where the direction is going, and I think. We want to be ready for that. So I think that's what I'm excited about.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's a 4D experience, exactly.
Any?
Yes, I think there's the technical solutions too, and particularly in the space that we're talking about here with physical large items, which are spatially more difficult to communicate as a retailer. Fashion has a slightly easier job because they can do a lot of video content, and so it's the different challenges, and not to make it sound easier, because there are lots of different elements to that. But I think for me, when you look out 5 years, and again you referenced it in your presentation, the level of personalization and understanding your customers on a one-on-one basis will determine again the difference between you being successful or not. One of the business I chair is Outfittery, based in Berlin. They've got 600,000 male clients, we call them clients, and we individually, for each and every single one of them, provide fashion solutions. That's hard. And the data scientists that work behind the front of our operation, who deliver solutions to that, is a mammoth task. And the sheer level of data processing, evaluation, algorithmic developments that you have to go through on an hourly basis to make sure that you are evolving with your customer and you are personalizing your communications with them, the content of the proposition, the physical product, and so on and so forth, is absolutely immense. But that's how we all need to start looking at it. Again, back to your presentation. So that has ramifications, and if I look at this room here, and I guess the audience, what are the ramifications of suddenly moving from the scale model into high personalization? And it does mean that this industry really has to step up. And when I look at some of the operators that I've worked with over the years, I spent time with, some of them within the logistics space really get that, and they have the right mentality to support new business models and the post-era solution, but some businesses don't, and it's really important for I guess, the logistics and 3PL spectrum to get on that page, because it has big consequences.
What do you expect if you're speaking about 3PL? How to adjust for the future?
So if I look back to whether it's a large or small business, quite frankly, whether it's TK Maxx, which is a multi-billion business, and being MD of that through a fast rollout period, or I look at a Superdry, which is a fast growth fashion business turning digital, or I look at my digital businesses now, what they all required was a logistics partner who could be flexible, because actually you don't know what you don't know. And if that was the case 10 years ago, it is ultimately the case today. And there are some very smart operators out there who will say, look, we will answer those questions with you. We won't apply the old model of how logistics charge and how they set up real estate to support it. We will think smartly and outside the known parameters. There are not many, but there are some who do it exceedingly well.
Any big technologies changes you're expecting which will be disruptive in that space?
So in the logistics space, I have a personal view that I'd say within the 5 to 10 year framework, we will have an army of drones around the world who will do parcel delivery. I think it's happening already, and again, there'll be people who are leading that from the front, and there'll be a lot of people who will follow up behind it, which is absolutely appropriate. But again, if you're not conscious of it, if you're not curious about it, if you're not investigating it, you will end up following way back. And so I think that in this space, particularly that we're talking about here, that is a very meaningful conversation, working with one of the real estate investment trusts who support e-commerce very, very strongly with real estate solutions, Tritax PLC. When we talk to our business partners, we see what that could look like, and it's a really big and important component as we look out.
Thank you. Shrenik, delivering furniture by drones is probably a little bit less common, I would assume, but what is the technology or experience you're most excited about?
The spatial computing thing, I think like that's happening. Like you said, like how you have a vision of like how drones would like deliver stuff for us. I think that you're not going to be using these screens anymore. So I think that is the biggest thing that I'm excited about. I think that I think all these different technologies, right, like AI or voice, all these things will kind of blend together in some way. So I can imagine a shopping experience in the future where you have like you have a digital assistant of sorts who's kind of like telling you or explaining the features of a particular product in your space, and you're kind of and you're interacting with that person, saying that, oh yeah, what other colors is this thing available in, right? Or do you think this will fit or not? So I think you'll have like this assistant plus like with like smart like voice capabilities and smart like I guess they understand your space. So I think for me at least the spatial part of it is it's not just about visualization, it's about understanding your space. So for example, if because since the machine knows what your space looks like, right? So it knows that you have a really like modern coffee table, right? So then you can kind of automatically suggest a modern like end table next to it. So these kind of things are what I'm excited about, I guess.
Yeah. You spoke about visualization. You spoke about tech. You spoke about these topics. What I didn't hear about, what is this voice tech? What's your perspective there?
It's so I think just like how you're going to move away from the screen, like you're going to move away from your keyboard as well. You're going to move away from these traditional input methods, right? I think computing is becoming more natural. So as that happens, the way you will interact with something is through voice, right? You're going to start talking. Like people are already doing it today with Siri and stuff like that. But I think it'll become more mainstream. So we're thinking about that. We already have an assistant today on Google Home. We don't market it that much, but like it's kind of if you can figure out where your order is, for example, you can just say like, hey, wait, tell me where my order is. It's just a kind of we're just dipping our toes in the water a little bit. So we're thinking about it. So I think it's the future has some exciting opportunities.
Yeah. Are there early pioneers out there where we would say they are already way ahead, or there are technologies which are already shaped by few global players where it's really hard to compete, where you just need to build and leverage on their technology?
Yeah, not really. I can't think of anything. Maybe, Suzanne, you have other ideas, but
Is Wayfair itself investing into voice tech?
Yeah, I mean, just a part of our small team, like it's probably just one person, right? So it's, we're thinking about it. It's not mainstream yet. It's kind of, we're still noodling on the ideas. So it'll take us some more time, I think, yeah. Because since it's so visual, right? So it's tough to kind of sell something through voice, right? So it doesn't make sense for us unless we figure out how to combine it with visual. It's going to be tough to use voice.
I think there are so many different things. And, if I look at the primary healthcare business, for instance, there are amazing technologies being created within the life sciences and primary healthcare business sector. Incredible things, which hopefully we'll all benefit from within the next 10 years as the ability to bring them to market and to have them utilized in a commercial sense becomes easier. And so you could name a whole raft of them. I'll give you one specific, which is quite cute. But I think the thing that's really important within all of this, and that's the point I think you were just making, there is still some personal contact required. And that goes back to trust. And if I look at a push doctor business, that experience you have when you use push doctor the first time, push doctor is basically an app that you download to your phone. And we basically, once you've set up your profile, we'll get you an NHS GP registered doctor on your handset within 6 minutes. So Instead of that experience of phoning up your doctor's surgery, convincing the receptionist that you really are dying and you need to see somebody waiting 10 days to see a doctor and so on, you get it within 6 minutes. It's a very powerful experience. But behind all of that smartness is a very human reaction. And the moment you have a good level of trust with the person who you're engaging with, all the smartness behind that on the platform and everything that happens after that, I'm not going to say it's irrelevant, because it clearly isn't, and it powers these experiences, but that trust means that you have that customer for a long time, clearly unless you get it wrong. But the combination of human interaction with really smart technology, that is what, in my view, the post-channel era really looks like. And it's when you as a consumer, whether you're consuming furniture or you're consuming apparel or you're consuming health, finding that business that talks to you at a cultural level that works for you, or if you like, that fits your tribe, or whichever way you want to describe it, that's where the real magic happens. And if you're a very smart business, consumer-facing business, you make that the center of everything you do, and you look for the technology to support that. And talking about a simple consumer product, which I think is really smart and really works on a human level, on a trust level, on a commercial level. I think it's Carrefour, they have this amazing wallpaper range, which is for kids. And so you basically wallpaper the whole room. It's beautiful paper. And you then download the app that's associated with the wallpaper. And you scan, you say to your child, you pick any figure you like on the walls. And the child goes up and picks a figure on the wall, and you scan that image into your mobile phone, and up comes the most magical story. And you tell your child a bedtime story which is personalized, because the child has picked a figure out of however many. And you also allow your child to edit the story if they want to elaborate on the story, so you create storytelling ability. And that's not a particularly complex piece of technology, but it's incredibly beautiful, and it works. And if you're a parent, your advocacy around that, to your point earlier, is extremely powerful. So tech can do lots of different things, but if you don't put the human experience at the center of it, then it won't be as powerful, and actually won't do a lot for your business either.
Thanks. I couldn't have illustrated this trust, personalization, and influence topic even better. So that was a very nice story. So I would like to open up the discussion to this group, to the folks around here. Many, hundreds I see, so I don't know who would like to start. Just go ahead. Any questions to Susanne or Shrenik?
End of a driving day.
You must have done a very good job.
That gentleman perhaps in the red trousers.
Stefan, yeah.
Okay. Everyone is a little bit exhausted, it seems. All right, so I think thank you for coming, for joining that session, and thank you both of you for joining the discussion. So many thanks.
Thank you so much.
And
Thank you.
have a good trip home. Huh?